we're back again for another video where we sit here, me, Patrick, and Matt and Jake. We sit here and we talk to you about the stuff that we have really enjoyed over the past month. And if you watched last week's video, you might have learned that Matt and I recently moved into a new apartment and don't really have much furniture yet. As you might have realized right now, that continues to be true. Yeah. Next time we'll have chairs. Me, Patrick H. Willems will begin.
People don't give a fuck what we have to say.
By the way,
people are like, Pat, who is that dude? Talk about comics, Pat, alone.
So, and in case anyone's watching this and is like, who are the other two guys? These are the other two guys who have, largely been responsible for much of the stuff on this channel, alongside me for years. Yeah. Like, all those videos that aren't video essays, they helped make them, or act in them, or wrote them. Yeah.
That's us.
They've been around for a while. My first rec from September 2017 is the Netflix original series American Vandal, which, look, honestly, it probably is the TV show I have enjoyed most in 2017. If you have not watched it yet,
haven't.
Jake, you don't even know what it is, right?
I don't know what
you
it is.
You haven't even heard about it? You missed all my great tweets about it.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
So essentially, it is a parody of sort of true crime things like The Jinx, or Making a Murderer, or Serial, or all those things that have become really popular recently. But it takes that format and that style and applies it to a very kind of medium stakes crime, which is, it's all set in a high school, and where someone vandalized all the cars in the faculty parking lot by drawing a dick on everyone. And then this one guy, this kind of like goofy, like burnout stoner dude who just pulls pranks all the time, named Dylan Maxwell, in the performance of the year, gets expelled for it. And the whole documentary that you're watching is, within the reality of this world, being made by this guy in the high school who believes that Dylan is actually innocent, and wants to document this whole thing and study the case and figure out who did the dicks. So the show begins as this beautiful, really just, this ongoing dick joke, and exploring just the drawing of dicks in more depth than you could ever imagine. And originally when I saw the premise, I was like, that sounds like a Funny or Die sketch, not, an 8-episode, 4-hour-long series. But what becomes amazing about it is the mystery is really compelling, and they have the perfect cliffhangers at the end of every episode. They reveal new bits of information so that you really genuinely want to know who did the dicks. It's also really, really funny. It's so funny. It's a very funny show.
Is this a limited series?
Yeah, there might be a second season, but they haven't announced anything yet.
Okay.
But it also, as it goes on, becomes one of the best teen dramas I've ever seen. It has the scope expands, it sort of fleshes out the entire world of this high school with all this, all the different the students and the faculty members, and you get to know everybody. And the portrayal of high school is so much more true to real life than just about any other sort of high school show I've ever seen. The use of social media is the best I've ever seen on a TV show. As in, there's a whole long sequence where they're trying to figure out information that happened at this party, and they recreate the entire timeline of this party and where everyone was through Snapchat stories or Instagram boomerangs. I loved everything about it. It's exciting and really, really funny and surprisingly moving near the end.
Yeah, that's the big part, is that it still manages to play with that sort of what Serial did, the wistful ambiguity.
Right.
But everyone has been now fleshed out as characters, so you kind of give a shit about the outcome of everyone in the show.
It's a great piece of satire and comedy, and also just a great teen drama. Huh. I can't believe it's as good as it is.
How many episodes is it?
8.
8 episodes. Where can you see it again?
Netflix. You'll go through it in a day.
Okay.
I promise.
Just do what you always do, guys. Just binge
That
on Netflix.
shit. All right, that's my first pick. I talked a lot. Gonna toss it over to Jake.
J-Bones. I'm going to follow the Netflix thread and just talk about another original release that just came out actually this past Friday. Although that probably won't mean anything depending on when this gets posted, so you can cut that out. But it's a it's a movie called Gerald's Game. It's the latest in a slew of Stephen King stuff that's just started to make it into
so much
TV
this year.
and film. I'm picking Gerald's Game because I wanted to pick it, but it's not going to make it into my picks this month.
Gerald's Game is the better
It's
King
the better
adaptation.
of the two. It's the better of the King adaptations this month. A woman and her husband go to a secluded lake house, and the husband, Gerald, is his game, as it were, is that he likes to handcuff her to the bedposts and enact a rape fantasy with her. He gets a heart attack. Although honestly, Bruce Greenwood plays Gerald in the show, and he's in super good shape in the movie. And in the book, Gerald's supposed to be kind of like this fat, out of shape piece of shit. So it makes more sense that he gets a heart attack. So Bruce Greenwood, who's weirdly ripped, I don't really know either of these actors that well, but I just remember thinking he didn't fit Gerald in my mind.
You can it can strike at any moment.
Bruce Greenwood,
if you have a weak heart.
He's in lots of stuff.
He's in lots of stuff. I recognize his face. He was great in this movie.
He was just
he's not an actor I follow
the
that
president of the United States in the Kingsman sequel.
He falls off the bed and dies. And so the whole plot of the movie is that Jesse needs to get off the bed. That's it. That's the plot of the movie.
Is it really all set in like the one room?
So,
or would that be spoiling stuff?
Not to spoil anything, it's 80% set in the bedroom. There are some key flashback sequences in the movie that give you a little bit of backstory in Jessie as a little girl that are important to the theme in general of the movie. But the whole thing is set in the bedroom, and the main reason why I wanted to pick this movie was because I wanted to give a shout out to Mike Flanagan, the director, for being very toned down in his approach to doing what could have been like a super schlocky. And honestly, like, if you had told me this movie was coming out, I would have said there's like a 90% chance this movie's gonna be dog shit.
Right.
But he keeps it super toned down and does something which I appreciate more and more often nowadays, especially when it comes to like psychological horror films and stuff like that. No soundtrack. Super minimal. Super minimal. Like, he basically just keeps everything quiet. There's like a couple songs
right.
in the beginning. And
So, them moving around and talking.
Yeah,
So
moving around. There's some sounds in the movie.
I haven't seen any of Mike
talkie.
Flanagan's
Let's just get that
movies, but
straight.
it seems like he's been on a bit of a roll, because didn't he do like Hush and Oculus, and then the apparently pretty solid Ouija prequel?
Sure. And none of them I've seen. I haven't seen any of them.
Yeah. I've heard generally good things about all of them.
It's kind of like a play in that it's set in one room, and
That-
it's mainly dialogue driven.
that makes a lot of
between
sense.
her and she sort of, as she gets more and more dehydrated, her personalities manifest as a more aggressive version of her husband who walks around the room and talks to her.
Oh,
And
so Bruce Greenwood
alternate-
comes back.
He comes back, like, yeah.
Okay, 'cause
Nice.
I was wondering if this was totally, because it's Carla
Gugino?
Gugino. I've never been
Sorry,
totally sure how to pronounce her name.
I don't know.
I was wondering if it was like a mostly like one woman show from her.
No. And there's a weird false wake up dream section that I would argue is one of the more disturbing things I've seen in a really long time.
All right,
Gerald's Game.
I'm sold. Matt, what's your first rec?
This isn't a full-throated recommendation. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I saw, and again, because I'm seems weird because Jake had one that involved this element to it, but the movie Elle by Paul Verhoeven. If you're expecting anything akin to RoboCop
Or Showgirls.
Which I love,
I haven't seen it.
or Starship Trooper, it's not one of these.
So it's not a laugh riot.
It's not a funny sci-fi satirical laugh riot. No, this is like very much in the vein of European, like very like European movie. It feels like it's all French actors, including Hooper. What's her? Isabelle Huppert.
Huppert.
I'm gonna call her Isabelle Huppert. Whatever.
Just call her Izzy. Izzy Hupp.
Izzy Hupp.
Izzy Hupp killing it now.
It's like calling Penelope Cruz Penelope Cruz. The overall message of this movie is unclear to me, which is why I haven't sussed it out yet, and I'm not like 100% just like this is a must see. But I've definitely thought about this movie, Pat, since seeing it for a long time, because the theme, as far as I can tell, is like, you know, she gets raped, and then she just sort of calmly goes about her day, like sweeps up a broken vase, and becomes sort of fixated on the event. And then the movie is sort of about her discovering unacceptable desires in herself through that, and she finds out who the assailant was, and then there's a whole weird interplay with that, and she's also a video game developer in the movie.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot. And she's like, you know, and she's like fabricating these violent fantasies essentially at her job, and the incident starts to affect, like, you know, it affects her job and plays into that. And basically it's her kind of self-actualizing by the end of the movie.
So I've been meaning to watch this movie now for a year. I had thought it was like sort of a revenge movie for a long time. No. And that had been my conception of it, as like her seeking revenge. Mm-hmm. And apparently it's about much more than that.
So again, I'm not like, you have to see this, especially if you're triggered by certain stuff like that, or like you just don't want to see rape anymore.
Which is
like,
totally understandable.
I get that, but like, I don't know, the movie's stuck in my brain kind of, and I think that gives it the right to be on the list of things that I recommend.
So it's back to me for our second round picks. And my second pick is a comic book. I got really far behind on comics like earlier this year, and so I've recently been catching up on a lot of stuff, and it's been fun because I can get to go through like big stacks of my favorite comics. And so I recently caught up on like 8 or so issues of one of my favorite series, The Wicked and the Divine, from Image Comics, written by Kieran Gillen, drawn by Jamie McKelvey, with colors by Matt Wilson and letters by Clayton Klaus. And I've always enjoyed this book ever since it started, I don't know, 2 or 3, about 3-ish years ago. But it's been on this stretch since like I think late last year, that I think it's the best it's ever been. Everyone is operating at full power. And appropriately enough, it's been this ongoing story arc called Imperial Phase, named after sort of like the term used for like when a pop star is like at their like ultimate peak, where everything they do is an event and is successful. Sort of like where Beyonce's been for like 5 years. If you're not aware of what this comic is, and wait, have either of you ever read this?
I read the first run.
The first volume?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first 6 issues.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And so the general premise is it's about this pantheon of gods that is reincarnated every 90 years, and then within 2 years they all die. And this is about this like the pantheon being reincarnated, I think in 2014, and they all become pop stars. And so it's this bizarre mix of like, you know, of pop culture and pop stardom combined with mythology, and right now it's in this section where it's like the bright neon Game of Thrones almost, with there like a lot of like alliances and people like and killing other people and large battle scenes, but also like battle scenes happening at huge pop concerts. If you're not familiar with like the collaboration between writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey, they did the Phonogram books together, which I really love, but are also maybe their least accessible, because a lot of them are like heavily reliant on understanding references to like 90s Britpop and stuff like that.
It's like very necessary that you understand those.
And but then they their Marvel series Young Avengers is, I think, one of the best superhero books of recent years. This has been one of my favorite comics of the year so far, and I would recommend you check it out and catch up, because it's cool right now. Over to you, Jake.
Jake.
Cool. Kind of thinking of a segue, talking about characterizations of gods, we're going to talk about a movie, maybe the most subtle take on the environment I've seen in recent times. We're going to talk about the movie Mother by Darren Aronofsky. Yeah. I saw that movie and I went into it knowing that it's divisive, apparently.
Got an F cinema score, famously.
I don't think it's any secret to say that, because the director and Jennifer Lawrence have spent the entire press tour for this movie just stating that, it's about how we are ruining the environment. So there you go. That's a big, giant, easy metaphor. I don't know, to wrap your head around. It's not like there's anything subtle about it. It probably also, for anybody that's seen it or knows a little bit about the movie, it's certainly not spoiling anything to say that the movie is the entire Bible, basically, which is it's kind of fun. You can sort of play that game when you're in the movie if you know, like, the Book of Genesis and you know the New Testament a little bit.
I also didn't
you can
know
basically
that
just pick
going
every
in.
single feature from the scene. It's literally like every scene has a corollary.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
about 90% of the movie.
Yeah.
It's very much allegorical.
Here's what I like about the movie and why I don't care that it's like super heavy-handed and very on the nose about a lot of its issues, is that I think I kind of like how like in your face and bold the statement is overall. Mm-hmm. Just in the fact that it's basically preaching like this simple lesson, humankind is destroying the planet, but it's for a movie that draws from the Bible and had so heavily. It's one of like the most sacrilegious movies I've ever seen in how it handles the giving of the Eucharist. I was doing like a little reading after watching the movie, and like the big thing that people were like, okay, we get the Bible, we get the environmental message, sure. And people were having questions though about the yellow powder. There's this yellow powder.
No one has an answer for the yellow powder.
I have a theory, so I'm just going to put it up here. So Jennifer Lawrence periodically throughout the movie, in the first half of the movie, shakes this yellow powder anytime she's getting upset.
It seems like a medicine.
It seems like a medicine. She swallows it and it sort of like calms her down. So somebody, like a more astute person, made a comparison that they're like, oh, this movie's kind of similar to this old 1890s Victorian short story called The Yellow Wallpaper.
Oh.
Somebody made that comparison. So that's already kudos to that person for catching that. So that was one thing. And then Darren Aronofsky's been on the record. They're like, hey, what's the yellow powder mean? He's like, it's like in reference to like sort of Victorian era stuff. So I was like, okay, so maybe this person figured it out really quickly. Like maybe it is a reference. So Yellow Wallpaper, very short story, like 6,000 words or something. You can read it really quickly.
It's really good.
But super creepy short story about this girl who's basically being kept locked away in her house by her physician husband. People have been saying, okay, The Yellow Wallpaper shares certain similarities with the movie in that it's like about the relationship of this girl and the room and Jennifer Lawrence and her association with the house, and they're like so connected, almost as if they're like, the same thing or one living organism, what have you. But it never quite figured out what exactly the yellow powder was. Mm-hmm. So when I was reading the short story, though, there's a line where she says, my husband makes sure that I take my phosphates every day. So I just Googled phosphates. So stupid. I just Googled it. Turns out phosphates are very important for enriching soil as far as agriculture goes, as well as being a remedy for personal health for humans. And if you understand the metaphor, what Jennifer Lawrence is fucking like fertilizer. And I just think it's there to enrich the movie.
Maybe I can do my last two in one go. I'll start out with the one that I most recommend, but I recommend both very highly. And it's a book by a man named Joseph Pieper, which is funny sounding. It's called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. It's a heady philosophy kind of book, but it's very short. It's
a nonfiction book.
It's a nonfiction book. It's two monographs kind of called from two lectures he gave, one on leisure as a concept, and then one on just the use of philosophy in culture and life. And the two are linked. So Joseph Pieper is a Thomist, I think that's how you say it, a follower of Thomas Aquinas, and medieval scholasticism, which is heavily based in Christianity, and he's like a Christian philosopher. But, I mean, I think what's relevant and why I picked this book up in the first place is that it's basically an argument for joyful contemplation and time away from the concept of utility and full work and full employment and a lot of the things that I think are just growing in, influence over our lives day to day. So it's just an argument for like giving yourself the mental space in the true sense, not of like jet skiing or like base jumping or going to some like fucking place or like doing drugs and going to a party, but like truly enjoying quiet time alone, because that is when you contemplate like the nature of things in such a way that you kind of enrich yourself and come up with genuine new ideas. And he sort of, at the end, he kind of goes off the rails and is like, but this is mostly for Christians. Like,
if you
like,
don't,
so he's like,
you'll go to hell.
Well, no, he's like, you don't have to be Christian to do this, but if you're thinking in these terms, like, you're basically, you're doing a Christian thing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like, obviously he doesn't really like hide that that's where he's coming from. And I'm simplifying and butchering, obviously, but it's definitely a beautifully written, short, manageable little bit of an argument for kind of not having things need to be difficult in order for you to feel accomplished. That's another big one. Like, not like all that anxiety people have about like feeling lazy and leisure. Is
this just like just go like, lay in a hammock. And
remember that good line from Hail Caesar when he's like in the confessional booth, literally, Josh Brolin? He's like, is it bad that something is easy? Because he's getting that job offer to work at Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
And he's just like, the offer's too easy. He's like, Father, is it terrible that this is so, like, there's such an easy way out of my shitty current life?
Well, there's like a definite criticism of like the Protestant, split of where the work ethic becomes all, and that definitely enters into it. So anyway, it's very, very, very good. I feel awkward, I guess, describing it because it's way better described, and hopefully I sold somebody on it. I recommend a cool like historical fantasy book called The Vor. It has nothing to do with the vor fetish, where people eat other people whole and look pregnant.
Not that.
It's a fantasy novel. It's set in a fictional portion of Africa, and it's based off of, I think it's Ray Rousseau. Roussel is a like a surrealist writer, and Brian Caitling is riffing off of a book that he wrote, which is also includes a reference to the Vor, which is this primeval forest in Africa that no one has ever found the center of, and no one's ever emerged from having explored it, but supposedly Eden is at the center, and like Adam and Eve are there, and these angels, and they have all these fucked up cannibal children who are like monsters that run around.
That sounds awesome.
And there's like this, sort of European Germanic settlement called Essenwald outside of it that is based on timber harvesting from the forest. And I don't know how to really encapsulate it.
Is it about people trying to go in there to find it?
There's like a thinly veiled, basically, like, there's historical figures in it. Ray Rousseau, I'm sorry about the name. He's basically in it and never really mentioned by name, but you figure out it's him. So it also has William Whitey Gull in it, who is the main character in From Hell by Alan Moore, who is a friend of Brian Caitling's and got him to write The Vor. There's a Cyclops kid who's raised by robots.
What?
And then gets freed and starts growing disproportionately and fucks some late people at a masquerade ball. And it all takes place in like that period I think it's like right after World War One. So it's like almost modernity, but it's still ancient. Yeah.
Right.
It is so good, and the only reason I'm bringing it up too is because there's supposed to be 3 of these books it's a trilogy.
Okay.
So I just picked up the second one, The Erstwhile, which I'm very excited to read. It rules.
So, my final rec is something totally different. It's not a movie. It's not a TV show. It's not a comic book, and it's definitely not a book.
What could it be?
God forbid I read. I'm going to recommend a podcast. It has become my favorite, I think maybe just my favorite movie podcast. It is Blank Check. which is essentially it's hosted by David Sims, who is the film critic for The Atlantic, a good critic, and Griffin Newman, who is an actor and comedian currently best known for playing Arthur in the new version of The Tick on Amazon, which is a fun show. Okay, whenever I listen to other movie podcasts, I'll be listening and I'll wish I could like join in the conversation or like make a reference or mention a tidbit because I have this stupid knowledge of pointless trivia about films, as these two will attest. Yeah. And this is a podcast where these people, where the two hosts have my same stupid, pointless, trivial knowledge of movies, and will always say the thing that I'm thinking of, and I really appreciate it. But it's also really funny, and they're funnier than me. So they share a lot of my opinions and know all the stuff that I do and probably more, but are just funnier. Essentially, they do a series of mini-series where they pick a director, someone who achieved like great success with one of their early films, and was then given basically a quote-unquote blank check to make whatever they wanted. And then they go through their whole filmographies. And so, they started, I think, with M. Night Shyamalan, and then did, like, the Wachowskis. And basically, it's just really funny, but also super insightful and an excellent, like, movie analysis and commentary. And that I really enjoy listening to. And I like their approach to it. Like, for instance, the whole Wachowski series, they're very pro-Wachowskis, which I am personally. And even when it's like one of their movies that doesn't entirely work.
What's their take on Jupiter Ascending?
They both sort of like it. As in, it's like, it's dorky and weird, but they just enjoy the movie's vibe.
I sort of like it.
And are kind of like, on board with it despite its failings. So, and it works really nicely as a podcast because the two hosts sort of complement each other nicely in that, like, Griffin is like, like manic and energetic and will go on long, weird tangents and will frequently, during the recording of an episode, order toys on eBay based on the movie that they're watching. There's an episode where he pulls out a paper that he wrote in 10th grade where he tried to solve racism in movies in a paper called Back in Blackface, Can You Minstrel Show Me the Way to Racism Town?
Wait, what grade was he when he wrote that?
10th. And it's an ongoing funny thing because he is like an actor working in Hollywood, and he is basically continually just sabotaging his career by just shitting on various movies. It's just a really excellent, really fun movie podcast that I listen to a lot. And so it's like if you like the film commentary videos that I make and are like, hey, what if this was better and funnier? Listen to this podcast.
And then slowly wean yourself off of Pat's content.
We're going to finish this one now.
They're finishing on a literary note.
I'm going to stoop to this guy's level. Sorry, everybody.
One day I'll recommend a book.
I read a book, and this will probably serve as a larger endorsement just for the author, too, who I've read 2 of his other pieces before. This is David Mitchell, The 1,000 Autumns of Jacob de Zoet.
Can I pause this for a second?
Yes.
I've read this book.
Both of these guys have.
Me, who has never recommended a book like a prose novel on this thing.
Do you like this?
I've read this book. I've read almost every book by David Mitchell.
As someone that's read Ghostwritten and Cloud Atlas, and I know that David Mitchell's MO is that all my books are a big giant book and they connect. Which is basically like...
kind of almost like he took the Stephen King thing, which is like they're sort of in the same universe, but made it a bit more literal.
Yeah, and so in a weird way, like reading all of his books and probably seeing things sort of pay off in books that he's previously written or stuff that he's going to write. This was a book that to me had a little bit of a slow start. Let me preface also, welcome to the Jake gets everything wrong part of this.
We all
because
do.
This is based on a certain historical period of time, 1799, set in a floating artificial trade city called Dejima off the shores of Nagasaki.
Right.
And it's about a Dutch trading company.
Because at the time, right, no one was allowed to actually set foot
in Japan.
In Japan.
So this is very much like a historical drama.
It's a historical fiction, and it's based on a period of time that, as far as I know, I don't know anything about it, and I don't think it's a particularly well documented period of time.
This was not covered in history class.
Yeah.
No.
And so the book focuses a lot on this Dutch clerk named Jacob de Zoet, who comes in hoping to sort of make enough money in his 5-year stint with the Dutch trading company to go back and then use that as like a way to secure a marriage with his sort of fiancée, this girl named Anna, who lives in Zeeland, which is where he's from. And then he sort of gets embroiled in all of this crazy internal corruption and intrigue that's happening on the trading post. And I won't spoil anything, like how I horrifically spoiled Mother. And all I'll say is that the book has 3 distinct sections, and they're all very radical shifts from one another. But it's a little bit of a slow start because you have to focus on learning sort of the internal logic of how Dejima worked and how the Dutch historically traded with the Japanese back in the late 1700s.
And there's a lot of Dutch names and a lot of Japanese names.
A lot of names that are hard to pronounce. Tons of characters. It's very difficult to keep track of them all. So it's a bit of a slow start. But what I found out was that this book, as I went through it, slowly started paying back like dividends as far as the effort that was required to sort of get into the time period and the characters and stuff like that. And it takes a very creepy and weird turn by the time you get to part 2, and then takes another kind of like radical shift. There's a huge cast of characters. I almost feel like it's a little bit of, at least as far as where I'm in it now. I haven't finished this book, by the way. I'm recommending it. I'm recommending it 2/3 of the way through. So
you're gonna hate it at the end.
Yeah, it could be garbage.
No, actually, some of the best stuff is in what you have yet to read.
Yeah.
Okay.
It ends strong. My personal favorite David Mitchell book, I mean, kind of battling it out with Cloud Atlas, is Black Swan Green.
Yeah.
His like most normal one. Since a lot of his books, do a Cloud Atlas type thing, which is we split into sections where there'll be like following different characters and different time periods and stuff like that, or they'll change genres and stuff like that.
He's kind of copped to it himself too. He's like, I'm actually just a novella writer. Who just manages to stuff them into all of these.
You notice
things.
that very particularly in Bone Clocks too, though.
Yeah, but Bone Clocks, same thing. But Black Swan Green is just a straight ahead novel, just like a coming of age novel about like a British teen in the 80s in England. What's also fun, if you read like all his books, things connect. Like, like that connects to Cloud Atlas and like all and connects to Bone Clocks and like like characters or like descendants or ancestors of characters appear in various things, and it's just fun. It's just like this nice added bonus.
It's interesting and it helps like enrich when you're reading all of his stuff if you've decided to just like go through it and do all of his books.
Right.
So let me just say that this is a recommendation for this book in particular, but check out this author because he's great and all 3 of us like him.
Yeah.
And that's it for September. Big month.
I'm sweaty. Are you?
I'm sweaty. I turned 30.
Sweaty and 30, ladies.
And next month, we'll have chairs.